Once upon a time, in the fertile plains of northern Nigeria, there lay a powerful kingdom called Zazzau. Its lands were rich, its people hardworking, and its rulers wise and just. The kingdom, surrounded by tall baobab trees and watered by streams that sparkled under the sun, was a place of peace and plenty. At the helm of this flourishing kingdom was King Bello, a man of courage and wisdom. King Bello ruled with fairness and sought always to serve his people. His queen, Zainab, was a compassionate woman whose grace and strength complemented her husband's rule. Together, they were beloved by their subjects, who often sang their praises in the market squares and during festivals. But amidst the grandeur and wealth of Zazzau, it was the royal family's youngest member who captured the people's hearts, Princess Aisha, the only daughter of King Bello and Queen Zainab. From an early age, Aisha had shown signs of exceptional intelligence and compassion. While other royal children might have been content to enjoy a life of luxury, Aisha was different. She would often slip away from the palace to mingle with the villagers, listening to their stories and learning about their struggles. This habit, though unorthodox for a princess, only endeared her further to the people. "She has the heart of a queen," the elders would say, their eyes twinkling with admiration. "One day, she will lead Zazzau to greatness." Physically, Aisha was striking. Her dark, expressive eyes seemed to hold the wisdom of generations, and her radiant smile could brighten even the darkest days. But it was her inner qualities that made her unforgettable. She was brave, fair, and kind, with a sharp mind that often left the palace councillors in awe. King Bello himself relied heavily on Aisha's counsel. Though he had 4 sons: Ahmed, the brave warrior; Suleiman, the thinker; Kabiru, the adventurous; and Musa, the playful youngest, Aisha was his confidant. "The gods have given me a daughter wiser than any chief," he often said, smiling as he listened to her thoughtful insights. For years, Zazzau had been at odds with their powerful neighbors, the warriors of Kano. The Kano warriors were infamous across the region for their ruthless tactics and insatiable hunger for conquest. While Zazzau prided itself on its prosperity and peace, Kano thrived on fear and bloodshed. At first, the Kano raids were sporadic. Small bands of warriors would sweep into Zazzau, stealing cattle or burning a few fields. But as time went on, the attacks grew more organized and devastating. They poisoned Zazzau's streams, razed entire villages, and left behind trails of destruction. The people of Zazzau lived in constant fear. Farmers abandoned their lands, traders hesitated to travel the once busy roads, and families huddled together at night, praying for safety. The kingdom's once lush farmlands began to wither under the weight of war, and hunger crept into the households of even the wealthiest families. The warriors of Kano seemed unstoppable. Zazzau's soldiers, though brave, were no match for Kano's larger, more brutal forces. Each time Zazzau went to war, they returned with fewer men and heavier losses. One evening, as the crimson sun dipped below the horizon, the chiefs of Zazzau gathered in the royal hall. The air was heavy with despair as they discussed the worsening situation. "We cannot sustain this any longer," said Chief Gambo, an elder with a voice that trembled with age and emotion. "Our people are starving. Our soldiers are dying. The gods themselves seem to have turned their backs on us." "But what can we do?" countered Chief Bala, a younger, fire-tempered man. "We cannot surrender. If we bow to Kano, they will strip us of everything: our lands, our dignity, even our lives." The debate raged on, but no solution seemed viable. Finally, an old priest suggested consulting the oracle, a sacred shrine where it was said that the gods spoke through their chosen priestess. Desperate for answers, the council agreed. The next morning, a solemn delegation, led by King Bello, made its way to the oracle. The shrine was nestled in a dense forest, its entrance marked by ancient carvings of animals and spirits. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs, and at the center sat Priestess Hauwa, an elderly woman whose eyes seemed to pierce through the soul. When the king and his chiefs explained their plight, Hauwa listened in silence. Then, closing her eyes, she began to chant. The room seemed to tremble as her voice grew louder, echoing with an otherworldly force. Finally, she opened her eyes, now clouded as if she were looking into another realm. Her voice, deep and resonant, delivered the god's decree. To save Zazzau, the king must make the ultimate sacrifice. His most beloved child must be buried alive at the riverbank. Only then will the gods intervene and protect the kingdom. The delegation returned to the palace in silence, their hearts heavy with the weight of the oracle's words. King Bello was shattered. Though he loved all his children, Aisha was the one who held his heart. The thought of sacrificing her was unbearable. 4 days, he wandered the palace like a man haunted, his eyes hollow and his shoulders slumped. He avoided Aisha, unable to look at her without feeling the crushing weight of his dilemma. Queen Zainab noticed her husband's anguish but could not get him to share his burden. Aisha, too, grew concerned. She often saw her father staring into the distance, his face lined with sorrow. One afternoon, unable to bear his silence any longer, she knelt before him in the palace gardens. "Father," she said gently, "you have not smiled in weeks. What troubles you so deeply? Please, share your burden with me." King Bello shook his head, his voice a whisper. "It is too heavy, my daughter. Too heavy for you to bear." But Aisha was persistent. Day after day, she pleaded with him, her love and concern wearing down his defenses. Finally, on the 7th day, he relented. With tears streaming down his face, he told her everything: the oracle's decree, the demand for her life, and his refusal to accept it. When he finished, Aisha sat in stunned silence. Her heart pounded as she absorbed the enormity of the god's demand. She thought of her people, the farmers who could no longer tend their crops, the children who cried from hunger, the families who huddled in fear each night. Finally, she took her father's hand. "If my life will save Zazzau," she said softly, "then I will give it willingly." King Bello stared at her, his face pale with shock. "No, Aisha, I cannot let you do this. There must be another way." But Aisha was resolute. "Father, our people are suffering. If my sacrifice can bring them peace, then it is my duty. I am the daughter of Zazzau, and this is the burden I must bear." News of Aisha's decision spread quickly through the kingdom. The people were devastated. Mothers wept openly in the streets, fathers bowed their heads in sorrow, and children clung to their parents, too young to understand the magnitude of the loss but old enough to feel the weight of the grief. Queen Zainab was inconsolable. She locked herself in her chambers, refusing food and water, her sobs echoing through the palace walls. Aisha, though heartbroken, remained calm and composed, comforting her mother and brothers as best as she could. Preparations for the sacrifice began. The oracle had decreed that Aisha must be buried alive at the riverbank, accompanied by 9 virgin maidens who would serve her in the afterlife. The maidens, inspired by Aisha's courage and love for her people, volunteered willingly. On the day of the sacrifice, the entire kingdom gathered to bid farewell to their beloved princess. Aisha walked through the streets with her head held high, wearing a flowing white gown. Her hair was adorned with beads and cowries, and her face radiated an ethereal calm. The people sang dirges and scattered flowers at her feet, their tears flowing freely. Behind her, the 9 maidens followed, their faces solemn but resolute. When they reached the riverbank, Priestess Hauwa performed the sacred rites, invoking the gods to accept the sacrifice. Aisha knelt before the freshly dug grave and turned to her people. "Do not weep for me," she said, her voice steady. "This is not the end. I will watch over Zazzau from the spirit world. I will watch over Zazzau from the spirit world. May the gods bless our land and bring us peace." Her words, spoken with grace and courage, brought a momentary stillness to the crowd. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if to honor her sacrifice. The priestess signaled, and Aisha, along with the 9 maidens, stepped into the grave that had been prepared for them. As they were lowered into the ground, the people of Zazzau wailed, their cries echoing across the hills. The sound of shovels piling earth over the grave was almost unbearable. Mothers clutched their children, and fathers shielded their eyes, unable to watch. The final rites were completed, and the priestess raised her hands to the heavens. "Oh, great gods of the rivers and skies, accept this offering and deliver Zazzau from its enemies." May the spirit of Aisha my Sito protect this land for eternity. The sacrifice was done. A profound silence fell over the kingdom, broken only by the sobs of the grieving crowd. Not long after the sacrifice, as the people of Zazzau tried to resume their lives, the warriors of Kano prepared for what they believed would be their final attack. Confident in their strength and ruthless in their ambition, they planned to march into Zazzau and destroy it completely. But as the Kano warriors approached the borders of Zazzau, they were met with a sight that froze them in their tracks. The entire kingdom appeared to be engulfed in flames. The bright, roaring fire stretched as far as the eye could see, its heat palpable even from a distance. Terrified, the warriors believed the gods themselves had cursed Zazzau, rendering it untouchable. Panic spread through their ranks like wildfire. Some dropped their weapons and fled, others fell to their knees, begging for mercy from unseen forces. In reality, the flames were not physical but a divine illusion created by the gods in response to Aisha's sacrifice. The illusion not only frightened the warriors of Kano but also marked the beginning of Zazzau's divine protection. Realizing that they could not defeat what seemed to be the wrath of the gods, the Kano warriors abandoned their plans. They retreated to their own lands, vowing never to provoke the kingdom of Zazzau again. With the Kano threat neutralized, Zazzau began to heal. The streams, once poisoned, now flowed clean and pure, providing water for drinking, farming, and trade. The farmlands, which had been left barren by the constant raids, began to flourish again. Green shoots sprouted from the soil, and soon, the fields were heavy with millet, sorghum, and maize. The people of Zazzau, though still grieving the loss of their beloved princess, found solace in the peace that her sacrifice had brought. They began to rebuild their lives, their hope renewed. Children laughed as they played in the fields, traders returned to the bustling markets, and families gathered around evening fires, telling stories of Aisha's bravery. To honor Aisha's memory, the people of Zazzau built a grand statue near the riverbank where she was buried. The statue depicted her in her final moments, standing tall and regal, her hands outstretched as if blessing the land. At its base, the words Aisha my Sito, Aisha the Savior, were etched in gold. Every year, on the anniversary of her sacrifice, the people of Zazzau gathered at the statue to celebrate her life and legacy. They brought offerings of flowers, fruits, and grains, thanking her for the peace and prosperity they now enjoyed. Songs were composed in her honor, and children grew up learning about her courage and selflessness. Aisha became a symbol of hope and resilience, her story passed down through generations as a reminder of the power of love and sacrifice. Though Aisha's physical life had ended, the people of Zazzau believed that her spirit remained with them. Farmers would often whisper prayers to her before planting their crops, and mothers would tell their children that Aisha watched over them from the spirit world. Some claimed to see her figure in the early morning mist by the riverbank, her presence a calming force that reassured them of Zazzau's safety. Others spoke of dreams in which Aisha appeared, offering guidance and wisdom. King Bello, though forever heartbroken by the loss of his daughter, found comfort in these stories. He often visited her statue, sitting silently for hours as he reflected on her courage. Queen Zainab, too, found solace in the belief that Aisha's spirit was still with them, guiding and protecting their family and the kingdom. As the years turned into decades, Zazzau flourished. The kingdom became a hub of trade and culture, its people thriving under the protection of the gods. The story of Aisha my Sito became a cornerstone of Zazzau's identity, a tale that united its people in pride and gratitude. Even in distant lands, travelers spoke of the brave princess who had sacrificed herself for her kingdom. Poets composed verses in her honor, and sculptors created likenesses of her image, ensuring that her legacy would never fade. Through her selfless act, Aisha had not only saved Zazzau but had also inspired generations to come. Her story became a testament to the power of love, the strength of sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of a people united by hope. And so, the memory of Aisha my Sito lived on, her name forever etched in the hearts of the people she had given everything to save.